Welcome back. We're still in a McDonald's. I'm still homeless. And I still don't know what part this is. We are still reading a dizzying array of metatext from the Gospel of John. I've just described to you what Hermes Trismegistus was by explaining the 3 stages of spiritual/intellectual greatness. We will discuss what intellect means. But not yet. We return to John chapter 1. I'm going to reread for you verse 12. But to all who did receive him, that is Jesus, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. That is, just understanding Jesus' message allows you to skip the stages of being initiated into a trade cult and through all of the sex cults. Just being a good Christian, just hearing the message, believing in his name, and embodying him in spirit as though he were there with you to remind you of how to be good and how to get to the kingdom and how to make the kingdom real, that alone ascends you to the second greatness by itself. Now, I came to believe in Jesus forthrightly many years after I experienced the throne. Because why the embodiment of the light, the truth, the way, all of this was necessary wasn't obvious to me. And why the idea of a return is necessary also wasn't obvious to me. In fact, the idea of a return on its face was dangerous to me, and maybe something that we as humans and modern humans should consider maybe editing out of the canon for ourselves. Switching headphones. For many decades, I thought that maybe Adventism or believing in the literal reincarnation, the literal resurrection, the literal death, the literal idea of a man historically who attempted these things was a bridge that I wasn't willing to cross because it seems dangerous. It seems extremely dangerous if you really think about it. And it doesn't just seem dangerous, it is. This is why the Didache was written. This is why so much of Jesus' ministry is warning you about false prophets. This is why the book of Revelations, which really should not, book of Revelation rather, John of Patmos, really shouldn't have been included in the canon. I still maintain that opinion. That book was about a specific time in history, and it all came true the way he predicted, and it's not something that we need. That revelation, that series of prophecies happened. So keeping it, they kept it in the same way that oh, you haven't heard it. Maybe you haven't heard me say this, because I haven't done it yet. You have to read Amos. You have to read you have to listen to me talk about the other prophets, I think, is where I talk about this, but like the books of the prophets. Especially I was telling you about how the serpent and other elements of the Hebrew texts are telling you that the text is subtly lying to you because of the way it was composed. And I do like as I explore it myself, I do like the documentary hypothesis where you've got the Yahwists and then the priests and then the redactors and then the Septuagint editors. And I do like that idea because if you just look at when the texts were written, that's evidence enough. If you read them in the order they were put in the if you read them in the order they were compiled in by the Septuagint compilers, you get this idea that the newer books, the newest books, are as deeply ancient as the ancient writings, the actually ancient writings, because you can convince yourself of the Talmudic tradition that it all came out of the prehistoric oral tradition. But there's no evidence of that, because some of the books have never heard of some of the Torah characters at all. So characters like Melchizedek and Tammuz and Nimrod don't have to be historical characters. In fact, they can be mythical heroes from other peoples, because the Talmud was written the Torah was written in 250. So the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, 250. That's 1,000 years after song like Psalms or poems like the Song of Rebecca. And so what that means is that Jacob is the oldest patriarch of which anyone who's Jewish agrees they know. Okay, we know Jacob. We know Jacobus. We know Jacques. Because Jacques, is in the Iliad. So we can all agree that there's some, these people are saying, we can agree that there's some crossover here, that there's a historical guy, that there's but Isaac and Abraham and Abram, no one had heard of them before the Talmud became the Pentateuch. The Torah became the Pentateuch, and then the it's so hard for me to bounce around these languages I'm not fluent in. I'm very sorry for that. I don't like saying I do a lot of because I picked that up from Italian, learning Italian. Is the thinking sound, and so it's not rude to do that, especially if you're bouncing between languages, and I am bouncing between languages I'm not fluent in, so I'm sorry. I cannot bring it up. Septuagint. The Septuagint is the biblical canon that became proliferated. That became widely read. Before that, it was whatever books, whatever synagogues had access to. That's why the redactors and the editors and the compilers and the documentary hypothesis is necessary, because when the exiled Jews came back, no one had ever heard any of the stories they were telling. Imagine if 16 Candles, just every copy of 16 Candles suddenly went away. Digitally, whatever. When you, person who watched it, let's just say that you grew up, that was your mom's favorite movie. And so you grew up with it as your favorite movie. And then your copy of that, your DVD copy, let's say. If you've watched the movie The Book of Eli, this is what this is about. But your DVD copy of 16 Candles just magically becomes the last. Or think about that movie about the guy who was the only person who could remember that the Beatles had ever existed. This is the same narrative, same thought experiment, same narrative construct. And then in 70 years, you've died. You give it to your daughter. That's your daughter's coming of age movie. So when she's 16, it's exactly 70 years later. Let's just say they were in exile for exactly 70 years. I don't remember the math. And then she starts showing people that movie on a massive scale. Everyone's going to have forgotten that movie ever existed. The only people who are going to know that movie existed are going to have, like, commentaries of people who liked it. And they're maybe going to have clips of it. And then now imagine that instead of the DVD surviving, what actually survived is your memory of it. And so you recreate it with new actors from your memory. That's kind of what the Torah is. And that's why certain books, the older books that contradict and are specifically talking about the god El, so they're not talking about Yahweh. They're talking about a different god. They're doing the same thing that, like, Marduk and whoever came. I don't have all of these so well memorized. Whoever Marduk overcame to become king of the gods. El and Yahweh have that kind of relationship. And so that's where this word Jesus, these hierarchies, these cosmogonies all come from, is explaining the historical order of events. The priests understood this, especially in Babylon. They had about three. By the time of exile, they had nearly 4,000 years of experience with the churn of house gods. And so that's why the Dean dropped the house gods. You understand? The Greek just dropped the gods of the houses. I no longer remember exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, right, I'm telling you that there's historical precedence for believing in Jesus rocketing you past child of man and child of God. So we're going to read 12 again. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. So the will of the flesh is eros. The will of the flesh is eros. The will of man is the eugenics cults, Aphrodite, but of God. God is the will of the author, the will of history. And so if you put yourself at the mercy of history and you aim yourself at changing history, meaningfully changing history, one of the things you have to do is die spectacularly. By Moida. 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory, oh, wait a minute. There was a footnote that I was trying to explain to you. Where is it? Oh, we're not there yet. Great news. Chapter 1, verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Son and Father here are capsed. Word is also capsed. What we need to talk about is glory. Glory, glory, glory. You may think that glory and honor are different words for the same thing. And you would be wrong. So here's how this is going to work. Honor is what you get when you're alive. Honors are things like medals and fancy swords and patches on your cloak, or maybe even just the cloak itself, the color. That's honor. Your honors are, like we were talking about in Simply Simplicity, your honors are those things with which you identify and you stack up, and that used to go into burial pits with you when you were done. Honors are your favorite things that are associated with things you survived, effectively. Glory, and we're not going to be, because I don't have my other phone, and I'm not going to risk minimizing my camera and the video getting stupid looking to look up words, and I don't have a laptop. So I'm not going to try to remember what the word glory is in Greek. But I'll tell you what it means. Glory, and we were just talking about the Iliad, so this is a perfect segue almost. Glory is what heroes get in death. You get more glory for being killed of Moida, having killed a bunch of other people by Moida. Glory is something you only get on the battlefield. And so, when the author John here writes, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory." Now, who do you think the us and the we is? Us is humans, but we is the mystery author. The mystery author. Do you understand that? We, royal we, the mystery author, have seen his glory. His glory. What does that mean? It means we've seen the men, the things that he has killed. In this case, probably subsequent to his death. Thus, glory is only the Son from the Father. Are you noticing the time travel narrative? Achilles is not a son of the Father. Achilles' glory is a kind of shame. We talk about this in the Phaedo and in the Apology, I believe. Achilles refuses his mother, the goddess, who tells him, just forgive Hector for killing your friend. Just forgive him. And Achilles says, I will not. And in scorn and anger, his goddess mother says to him, if you kill Hector, I'm killing you next. And he says, to hell with you both. And he dies. That's his glory. Well, his glory is a kind of shame, isn't it? Even by Periclean Athens, Homer was in doubt whether Homer's worldview was good or bad, whether his way of life that he suggested was good or bad, was already in doubt. Now, 700 years old, if it comes from 1200, but it doesn't. It comes from the 750s, which means it was about 200 years old. Which means it wasn't old enough for them to be rejecting it so soon. It takes 500 years to reject that stuff. And they were doing it at 250, which means the Athenians were ahead of the game and philosophy was working. And then philosophy takes a nosedive when Aristotle dies. Well, what's that about? Well, it was about Alexander dying. It was about the East-West divide. And then it was about the intellectual property of philosophy. And then it becomes theology because Jesus has fucking quit it. And so what did they do? They didn't fucking quit it. They just became theologians and started over and over and over and over and over. And here we are in this an infinite regression of startovers. My own included. Infinite regression of startovers. And so when he says, we have seen his glory, glory as only the Son from the Father. Now this capitalized Son is the Son. So we're talking about a deified Son. S-O-N. And what you need to understand is the deified Son is an evolution of theology, of religion, of iconographic ritual magic that began right as the Bronze Age collapsed. So the Son has been blamed up until Jesus' day for 1,200 years for everything. So by Jesus' day, they're looking back at Alexander as the prototypical, the Son. And we're asking, well, what was his glory? Well, his glory was an alcoholic's decay and assassination. Well, that's not the kind of glory that the Son of the Father would have. He's making a very specific distinction here, because the Son of the Mother is born in a eugenics cult in dies horrifically, like Charlemagne, and his kingdom is ripped apart immediately. This is what it is to be a son of the mother. And he's specifically talking about matriarchy. Not just ritual magic, but this is actually how matriarchal civilizations work. If the women control the land, when the son dies, the land goes back to the women. Nothing remains permanent. Everything just goes back. Every change just undoes itself at the death of the changer. But Jesus isn't like that. Jesus changed everything forever. He's a son of the Father, and the Father overrules the mother in the household when it comes to raising the children. The reason the Father is in the household is to raise the children. You understand that in tribal and nomadic peoples and those civilizations, the mother's brother raises her children. I don't know how you think that's superior to patriarchy. I'm air quoting that, patriarchy. The father staying in the home and raising his children. It's been proven over and over again that women, single mothers, cannot raise moral and ethical children. You can't raise a child with a spine if he has no evidence of what a spine looks like. And so you have to understand that this book was written when fathers weren't in the household raising their children. First century AD, you think fathers were in the household raising their children? All of these books in this Bible tells you, stay home and raise your children. That means nobody was doing it. If that's the righteous path, no one was doing it. Everyone was taking the sex where they could get it because that's the will of the flesh. That's what the body wants. Well, the will of the mind is going to say, well, if I can get away with it. But that's the sexual iniquity that the very ancient writers were talking about. Jesus will later in Matthew, when I get around to it, either Matthew or Mark, it's one of the ends, denounce that behavior with the Samaritan woman at the well. I don't know how you don't know that. I don't know how you can read this. I don't know how you could have professionals read this to you and just not hear it, not see it. I don't know how I'm the first person to come to this. I'm not special. I was even talking to my therapist about this, and I said, I know, Justy, what you're supposed to tell me is that I'm a paranoid schizophrenic who's trying to be idiosyncratic, and I'm telling you, I'm not. That's not what this is. It's Philalite, it's the truth. You can believe. You can hear, you can believe in my name, and you can skip all the bullshit, and you can get right to God. I've been telling you that from the beginning. Or you can not, and you can miss the bus. That's fine. I didn't miss the bus. And you can ask yourself, well, why didn't he miss the bus? Why are we so different? Is he better than me? Should I be envious of him? What about him should I be imitating? And you're going to get yourself into a dead end doing that if you're not talking to me about it directly. And I'm not going to give you the answers without pay. Ask all of the people who just bailed on my life. Those of you who are still subscribed to me, ask yourselves how it's going for you. Ask yourselves how it's going for you without me. Really? Like, ask the question. Is imitating me without me around to tell you how you're doing it wrong really working for you? Who's telling you what you're doing wrong? Who's telling you how to fix it? You know, you thought that our relationship, those of you who are still subscribed from the previous and that watch this from the previous life, you thought that our relationship was one of you giving me critique, me taking it. But you weren't listening to hear. And you weren't watching me take your critique as exemplary of taking critique. You didn't receive my critique back the way you got it, the way you gave it to me. How's that going for you? It's probably going real bad. In fact, one of you, I know it's going real bad. Real bad. Real bad. You know how you could fix it? Not just with me. Everything that's gone bad. You know how you fix it? 2 words. One of them's a compound word, so you could, let's say 3 words. Here's the holy trinity of problem solving. I am sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry I had to make the choices that I had to make to survive. I am sorry for that. I'm even sorry for your contribution. I'm sorry that I didn't make it easy for you. But the thing that I'm most sorry about, if we understand that like sorry is like woeful, I'm woeing, I woe, that you weren't better prepared when you met me. That's what I really woe. So ultimately what I'm telling you is that I am sorry. You have put me in a place where I am in woe. But you're the one who owes me an apology. I don't owe you an explanation. I've been forthright and explicit about every step of my life since I began this process 5-6 years ago. If you didn't take the time to tune in, you didn't believe my name. You didn't believe me, you didn't take me seriously. Everyone who came after Jesus said the same thing. You didn't believe. You didn't take him seriously. And now look at you. Well, now look at you. I'm happy where I'm at. You don't even understand. My only real worry is how am I going to get home without drawing attention to the fact that I live there? How am I going to keep people from looking over that ravine, seeing that a guy lives down there, and telling Coles, and Coles telling the cops, and the cops telling me to leave again? My only worry is like that my sister and my friends and my audience won't fucking listen to me, that I want this. I want it. I want my 40 days. I am owed it. I'm allowed it. Why am I not allowed this? What tyranny? We have seen his glory as of the only Son. This is subtitled, footnoted, or only one, or unique one, the only one. So what this is saying is that it's actually elevating God above Plato's one. Jesus was the one. God is the one from which the one comes. The one that is the one. That is differentiated from the one. And that it can become two. Do you understand what that means? God can't be married. That's what this is saying. This is saying that the ancient peoples got all of that, trying to marry the earth with the God of reality, cannot happen. Because once you come to understand astronomy, you realize that the Earth that we live on isn't the only planet that might have life on it that God might be considering. He can't have polyamorous marriages with every planet that has life on it. It's right here. It's right in the Ionics. That's an idea that's 3,000 years old. That idea has legs. The idea that we need as a species to be humble. There are other bodies up there. God has other children. Even if you just think in the hierarchy, the complexity of angels and demons. God has a whole family of relations that have very strong wills. Think about the Luciferian rebellion. If you think about that as an historical moment in time, God upset his oldest son so bad he moved the fuck out and took a third of his family with him. That's not nothing to the author John here, the mystery author John. I'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.